were not using logic to make your decisions. Instead, you were using logic to justify your decisions, which are based in emotion. Understanding the development of the brain not only leads to happiness, but it also leads to better decision making. Brain development is as follows. We have the lizard brain, which is responsible for aggression and survival. We have the mammalian brain, which is responsible for social belonging, pleasure, memory. And finally, we have the prefrontal cortex, which is the more modern aspect of our brain, which is responsible for rational thinking. This is where our classic ego sits. And very often, this is where people place their identity. They identify with this aspect of their brain. Humans are emotional creatures. The modern brain developed around these older aspects of the brain. So understanding the brain's development is crucial to understanding yourself. It's crucial to understanding therapy, trauma, healing, personal development, and really life. We, collective science, are incredibly limited about our knowledge of the brain. You, my viewer, are incredibly limited about how powerful these older parts of the brain are. If you don't accept this and you don't understand this, you will be a slave to these older aspects of the brain. But once you begin to accept it and understand it, you can actually work with these deeper aspects of the brain instead of working against them. So the best ways to work with it is in your relationship to identity. Psychological research suggests that flexibility in your thinking is the key to happiness. Now, I'm going to take this a step further. Flexibility in your identity is the key to happiness. James Clear, in his bestseller Atomic Habits, talks about the importance of not identifying with your habits. Your habits are not you. You are not your habits. You should be far more concerned with your current trajectory. The problem is people get stuck in this loop where they're identifying with their habits. They're identifying with their small, minute decisions, their morning routine. They identify with this more modern part of the brain, the prefrontal cortex. When you do this, you end up propelling the self-defeating cycle of shame and perfectionism that ultimately does not serve your best interest. It does not serve your idealized version of self. So instead of identifying with your habits, you need to identify with things greater than you. In the same way that these older aspects of the brain, in many ways, are bigger and greater than you, meaning that they dictate a lot of your thinking and your decision making without you even realizing it, you need to identify with things that are bigger than you, that can give you the resource and the power to live a life according to sustained happiness, purpose, vision, and service. So what are these things that are bigger than you? These things are virtues. They are virtues and principles that are timeless, that are classic. They have been found and utilized by the greatest thinkers all throughout history for a reason. Here are the 4 virtues. Prudence, which is common sense. Temperance, which is moderation in all things. Justice, which is fairness, honesty, respect. And fortitude or courage, which is fighting for what is morally right. Identifying with virtues instead of identifying with your habits is significantly more holistic, and it's also significantly more conducive to living a happy, fulfilling, sustainable life. This is what I want from you. By the way, if you don't know me, my name is Brian Meyerhofer. I am a coach and an associate marriage family therapist. I've been working for the last 8 years. I've coached hundreds of people offline. Just beginning my content journey here, so if you can go ahead and subscribe, I greatly appreciate it. The paradox is that when you stop identifying with your behavior, it feels like an aspect of surrender. But what happens is that you get greater power and empowerment, which leads to a greater ability to live the life that you desire. Do not identify with your habits. Instead, identify with virtues bigger than you. They will serve you, they will show up when you need them, and you will be blown away by the results of how your life looks. At 20 years old, I was stuck on a hedonistic roller coaster of sex, drugs, and rock and roll. I remember crying myself to sleep one night with the loop, "I hate you, Brian," on repeat. Every morning I would wake up and I would write in my journal that today was going to be different, but inevitably, I would end up falling back into the same behaviors. So what did I do? I found myself in a position where I was able to plug into one of these virtues, which is fortitude, courage. I knew that the life that I was living, that my behaviors weren't in alignment with what was morally right for myself and the people that were around me. So I made a decision based off of a virtue. I was a college student at the time, so I thought that this is normal. This is what everyone was doing, right? So I thought. The voice of my identity rang, this is just who I am. I was in a position where I was identifying with my behavior, and the shame was killing me. It was eating me alive. I thought I was these behaviors. I thought I was this gnarly lifestyle that I was stuck in. Looking back on it now, 12 years later, I realized that what I was actually able to access at that time was something that superseded my behavior. It was bigger than this identification of this hedonistic and destructive lifestyle that I was on. And what I was able to access was fortitude and courage, fighting for what was morally right for myself, my family, my community, and the people that I was around. It was this virtue that showed up at this proper time in my life that propelled me to make a decision that saved my life. What happened within the next 6 months was astonishing. I moved to Hawaii and I started working on a farm. Every single day I was journaling, I was engaged in individual and group therapy. I experienced a lot of emotions that I was previously numbing myself to. I dug into the land. I spent so much time connecting to my body, connecting to Mother Nature, connecting to the ocean, getting in cold water, and my spirit came alive. My spirit suddenly enlivened, and I realized that this type of behavior that I was lost in was not me. It was not who I was. I thought it was my identity, but I realized my identity is so much bigger than my behaviors. There is something else available to me here on this planet that supersedes my own individual identification of self. And from that epiphany, from that discovery 12 years ago, I've been able to build a life based off of these virtues that have changed everything. Every single good thing that I have in my life right now is a result of that decision that I made when I was 20 years old. And I want to save you guys the trouble of having to go through this process. If you're in a position where your behaviors aren't in alignment with what you want, they don't sit in your ideal version of who you are, it's important to not identify with those behaviors. There is something else available to you on this planet. And if you simply are able to detach and remove your identity and sort of ask yourself this question of, am I really who I think I am? That distance that you create, that detachment will open up opportunity for greater resource, greater power, greater virtue to enter your life, and you can set yourself on a path that will astonish you. This has been the case for me. I've seen it in so many people that I've worked with. They identify with their behavior. When you identify with behavior, behavior is not in alignment with what you would like. It ends up reinforcing shame. It ends up reinforcing control and perfectionism. It becomes a snake eating its own tail, and you get stuck in this loop that ultimately doesn't serve you. So I have an invitation for you. Recognize one behavior that is killing you, whether it's an addiction, a bad diet, a lack of movement, lack of exercise, and create a plan to eradicate it immediately. There is no, I'll start tomorrow. There is no, I will start on Monday. You need to create a plan, commit, find somebody to support you, and eradicate this behavior immediately. One committed decision can change your life. This has been the case for me twice. We must be willing to let go of the life that we had planned so that we can discover the life that is waiting for us. Joseph Campbell. The second decision that I made was a decision to save my heart. Last April, I opened a business with a really dear friend of mine. I was really excited about it. We raised some money. We got all the pieces in order. We started a holding company and we launched. Within the first couple months, we found some real success. I was making some money. I was feeling more connected with my buddy than ever. And things were exciting. But as the months progressed, there was one thing that I could not ignore. I hated it. I hated the lifestyle that it brought me. I was putting out fires all day. I unfortunately was dealing with very sick people that had no interest in getting better. And I could not ignore this restless whisper that existed in my mind, in my soul, in my heart. There was a calling, a deep beckoning, this restless whisper that was gnawing at me in my ear saying, I hate this. I don't like this. What happened was over the next couple months, I ignored it. I was in a position where things were going well. I was making good money, and I did not listen to that whisper. And my life began to dry up. The moisture of my life, the inspirational quality of life, eros that is available, suddenly was absent. I was waking up with a lack of vitality, a lack of energy, a lack of purpose, a lack of gratitude. And I absolutely knew if I continued to progress down the line of this business, it was going to kill my heart. Now, I was super tied to this endeavor. I had financial investment. It was with a really dear friend of mine. I felt all this responsibility in this business, but I could not ignore the reality that I hated it. Now, most likely you are aware of your own restless whisper, that one thing that is gnawing at you, that one little thing that is tugging at your sleeve, just begging you to listen, begging you to adhere what it is that it's trying to tell you. Whether it's a career, a broken relationship, avoidance of a difficult conversation with somebody close to you, there is something right now that is killing your heart. How can you expect to give your heart if it's empty? How can you expect to give to others if your heart isn't full? There are a lot of people, a lot of coaches that talk about building your mind, the importance of knowledge and education, and I don't want to discount that, but it is more important to build your heart. Life is an internal game, and if you don't have a full heart, if you have an empty spirit, you will not have the motivational, inspirational quality to fulfill your purpose and live a life worth living. So what happened was that the pain of ignoring this restless whisper became greater than the fear of uncertainty, because we have a hard time dealing with uncertainty. Control is at the root of many mental disorders. And eventually, if you continue to ignore this restless whisper, it will slap you on the face so many times until you listen. And that pain, my hope is that that pain gets greater than the fear. Because here's what happened for me. My pain pushed me until something else began to pull me. Recognize the one thing that is killing your heart and create a plan to eradicate it immediately. The results of me leaving that business led directly to you watching this channel. I'm so grateful that I had the intuition to listen to my own restless whisper. I'm so grateful that I was able to plug in to fortitude and courage and fight for what I knew to be right. Life's too short to waste your heart. It's too precious to let fear win. How this plugs into the brain's development is understanding that when you are finally able to let go of your identity, let go of these things that you create identification around, like a relationship, like your behaviors, like a job, like a role that you're in, when you're able to create some distance from that, these older parts of your brain, your unconscious, the mammalian brain, these other aspects of thinking where your deeper sense of self sits, they begin to have a voice. They begin to be heard.